Robert, a wealthy businessman, couldn't ignore the sight of a homeless mother and her two young children shivering near his property on a chilly evening. Compassionately, he invited them to stay in his warm, spacious garage. The mother, Sarah, accepted his offer with gratitude, her relief palpable yet tinged with anxiety. That night, unable to sleep, Robert wrestled with doubts about his decision, ultimately reassuring himself that a good deed would lead to positive outcomes. His heart sank when he discovered the unsettling reality the next day. Robert felt a pang of empathy as he looked at the woman and her kids. "Would you like to stay in my garage? It's warm and safe," he asked. The mother hesitated before nodding. "We'd be grateful, thank you." Leading them to the garage, Robert fetched some blankets and pillows, making a makeshift bed. His heart swelled with a mix of relief and uncertainty as he saw them settle down. Sarah, the mother of the two kids, introduced herself while arranging the blankets. "I'm Sarah, and these are my kids, Ben and Lucy," she said, her voice trembling. Ben, the boy, clung to her leg, while Lucy, the girl, looked around wide-eyed. Robert smiled reassuringly. "I'm Robert. You're safe here." Sarah visibly relaxed, though the anxiety hadn't completely faded from her eyes. That night, Robert tossed and turned in his bed, wrestling with his decision. What if this didn't turn out well? But a small voice in his head kept repeating, "You did the right thing." He finally fell asleep, hoping that this act of kindness would lead to good things. After all, everyone deserves a second chance, and helping those in need was never wrong, he assured himself. The next morning, Robert decided to check on the family. He picked up some breakfast from a nearby cafe: hot coffee, sandwiches, and orange juice. Entering the garage, he found Sarah and her kids still asleep. He gently knocked on the door. Sarah woke up, looking disoriented at first, but then recognizing Robert. "Good morning. I brought you some breakfast," he said, handing her the food. Robert wanted to make the family feel at home. "Hope you like sandwiches," he joked, trying to lighten the mood. Ben and Lucy took the food shyly, their eyes wide with curiosity. "Thank you," Sarah said, her voice filled with sincerity. "This means a lot to us." Robert nodded. "It's the least I could do. Let's sit and eat together." They all sat on the floor, enjoying the meal. As they ate, Sarah opened up about her situation. "We were evicted, I lost my job, and everything went downhill from there. We had nowhere else to go," she explained, her voice breaking a bit. Robert listened attentively, feeling a mix of emotions, sorrow for their plight, and admiration for Sarah's strength. "You're safe here, at least for now," he assured her, hoping to ease her worries. Robert couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as he listened to Sarah's gratitude. He had always believed in using his resources to help others, and this was a tangible way to make a difference. The relief in Sarah's eyes was all the validation he needed. "I'm glad I could help," he said, feeling that perhaps he had made a small but meaningful impact on their lives. The rest of the day, Robert tried to go about his business, but Sarah and her kids were constantly on his mind. He wondered how long they could stay in the garage and what more he could do to help them. The sight of their relieved faces haunted him, making him question if just giving them a roof was enough. The questions lingered, nudging at his conscience repeatedly. Robert's colleagues noticed he was unusually quiet and preoccupied. During lunch, one of them finally asked, "Hey, Robert, is everything all right?" He decided to share. "Yeah, I've been thinking. I found a homeless family near my place, and I let them stay in my garage." The room fell silent. "Really? That's incredible!" another colleague exclaimed. Robert nodded, feeling a mix of pride and responsibility for the family. Robert's colleagues had varied opinions about his decision. Some nodded approvingly, "Kind gesture, Robert." Others raised eyebrows and warned, "Be careful, you never know with strangers." He heard remarks like, "You did what?" and "What if they take advantage?" Despite the mix of praise and caution, Robert kept his thoughts to himself, pondering the wisdom of his choice. He knew he'd have to trust his gut and keep an eye on things. As Robert left work early, doubts started creeping into his mind. "What if they're not who they say they are?" he thought while driving home. He decided to leave earlier than usual to check on Sarah and the kids. His mind raced with both hope and suspicion. Pulling up to his driveway, he took a deep breath and tried to steady his nerves before heading to the garage. Robert didn't come empty-handed. He brought bags of groceries and some toys for the kids. "Hey, thought you might need these," he said, handing Sarah the bags. The children's faces brightened as they saw the colorful toys. They giggled and clapped their hands. "Thank you, Mr. Robert," Sarah said, her voice filled with gratitude. The joy on the children's faces made Robert smile, momentarily easing his doubts. Sarah's gratitude seemed genuine. "I don't know how to thank you enough," she said, looking directly into Robert's eyes. "Just take care of the kids," Robert replied. Her sincere tone and kind eyes made him feel somewhat more secure. Gathering her thoughts, she added, "We've had a rough journey, but this kindness gives us hope." Robert nodded and thought, maybe he made the right call after all. Over the next few days, Robert couldn't help but grow fond of the children. The little boy, about 3, always had a toy truck in his hand. The girl, just 2, reminded him of his younger sister when she was that age. They'd wave at him and shout, "Hi, Mr. Robert," whenever they saw him. The children's innocent affection started melting his initial cautiousness, pulling him closer to them. Sarah began sharing bits of her past. "We lost our home last year," she said one evening, "and every opportunity to get back on our feet just slipped away." Her stories were filled with hardship and lost chances. Robert listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes questioning, always engaged. Their conversations deepened their bond, creating a layer of trust that had been missing at the start of their arrangement. Curious neighbors began to take notice and ask questions. "Who are those people?" Mrs. Henderson asked, over the fence. "Just helping a family in need," Robert replied, hoping to deflect any further nosiness. "It looks like chaos in your garage," another neighbor pointed out. "Everything's fine, really," Robert reassured. He maintained a calm front, but knew that too many questions could create complications. He'd have to handle this delicately. Odd occurrences started to unsettle Robert. Items in his house seemed misplaced, and strange noises echoed in the night. One evening, he saw shadows moving near the garage and heard a muffled, clanging sound. "What on earth is going on?" he muttered to himself. He decided to keep a closer eye on the area around the garage, intrigued and disturbed by these peculiar happenings. Something didn't add up. To ease the tension, Robert invited Sarah and the kids to have dinner inside his home one night. "Join me for a meal," he offered, trying to sound casual. They accepted gratefully, and soon the dining room was filled with chatter and laughter. The kids enjoyed their food, and Sarah seemed relaxed. For a moment, Robert felt like they were just any other family, sharing a heartwarming meal together. That night, after everyone had returned to the garage, Robert heard shuffling sounds coming from that direction. He cautiously approached, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Everything seemed in place. "Must be my imagination," he whispered, trying to convince himself. Still, the unsettling feeling stuck with him. He'd need to stay vigilant, as something didn't seem quite right. The mystery of the noises lingered in his mind. Robert decided to install a small security camera in the garage. He wanted to understand what might be causing the unsettling noises. "This should clear things up," he muttered, while mounting the device. Robert made sure the camera was discreet, hoping it wouldn't be noticed by Sarah or the kids. With everything set, he went back inside his house, his mind still puzzled over the strange occurrences. Robert kept his new action a secret from Sarah. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable or feel like she was being watched. "She's been through enough," he thought. During their evening conversations, he maintained his usual relaxed demeanor. Sarah had no clue about the camera, and Robert intended to keep it that way until he gathered enough information. The following morning, Robert couldn't wait to review the footage from the camera. He quickly checked the recordings while sipping his coffee. What he saw made him raise an eyebrow. There was Sarah, rummaging through some of his stored items late at night. Robert leaned closer to the screen, trying to figure out what she was looking for. His curiosity piqued, mixed with a hint of concern. In the footage, Sarah seemed to be searching for something specific. She wasn't just moving things around randomly. It looked like she had a goal in mind. Robert's mind raced with possibilities. What could she be looking for? He wondered. Her actions were deliberate and focused, which only heightened his curiosity and concern. This wasn't the behavior of someone casually exploring their surroundings. Robert decided against confronting Sarah immediately. He wanted to gather more evidence before making any accusations. "I need to be sure," he thought. He didn't want to jump to conclusions and risk causing unnecessary tension. Stepping away from the screen, he started to think of other ways to monitor the situation. For now, he'd keep an eye on the footage and observe her behavior closely. Robert began to monitor the footage more closely. Every night, he'd check the recordings, noting Sarah's repeated late-night searches. She was consistent, returning to the same spots, which made him more intrigued and wary. "She's definitely looking for something," he thought. The mystery deepened with each passing night, and he knew he couldn't keep this up forever without some sort of resolution. As Robert continued to watch the recordings, his anxiety grew. What could she possibly be looking for? He wondered repeatedly. He found himself becoming more engrossed in the mystery. The more he watched, the less he understood. Every little detail started to bother him. His mind was now consumed with questions and speculations. He needed to know the truth, and it was driving him a little crazy. Robert decided to subtly question Sarah during their conversations. "So, what are your plans for the future?" he asked casually. "I mean, once you get back on your feet." Sarah seemed genuine as she talked about her past and her struggles. She didn't give any indication that she knew about his suspicions. Robert listened carefully, trying to find any hint or clue that might reveal her true intentions. As Sarah spoke, her eyes filled with tears. "It's been so hard," she said, voice trembling. Robert felt a pang of guilt. His suspicious thoughts clashed with his empathetic feelings. Her emotions seemed so raw and honest. "Am I just being paranoid?" he wondered. Still, the footage didn't lie. He was torn between the evidence and the emotional weight of her story, making the situation even more complex. Meanwhile, the children remained innocent and unaware of the tension. They played happily around the house, their laughter filling the rooms. The little boy clutched his toy truck, while the girl twirled around with a doll. Their joy was infectious, making Robert smile despite his worries.
Also, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these real-life stories every day. Now, back to the story.
He couldn't let his suspicions affect them. They were just kids, after all, caught up in a situation they didn't understand. That evening, Robert handed Sarah some money. "This is to help you get back on your feet," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. Sarah's eyes widened, and she nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Robert," she replied quietly. Robert hoped this gesture would show his trust. He then walked back to his house, wondering if she would truly use the money as he intended. Despite his efforts to stay calm, Robert could feel his suspicions boiling over. He found it harder to ignore the uneasy feeling each day. The late-night searches in the recordings haunted him, making him question everything. She must be hiding something, he thought, pacing his living room. His mind raced with conflicting thoughts, and he knew he needed to take action soon. To put his mind at ease, Robert decided to take a day off work. He wanted to stay home and monitor the situation closely. "I need to see for myself," he thought, as he informed his secretary of his absence. Sitting by the window, he kept an eye on the garage, watching for any unusual activity. His patience wore thin as hours ticked by. That night, Robert saw Sarah sneaking into the garage again. This time, he decided to follow her quietly. He moved stealthily, making sure his footsteps were silent. As he approached, he could hear faint rustling sounds. What is she up to? He wondered, keeping his distance. The adrenaline rush made his heart pound louder, but he maintained his focus, eager to uncover the truth. Peeking through a crack in the door, Robert watched as Sarah opened a hidden compartment in the wall. She carefully took out a small old box and hid it in her belongings. Robert's eyes widened with surprise. "What on earth is in that box?" he muttered to himself. He retreated quietly, deciding to wait for the right moment to confront her about it. Overwhelmed with curiosity and doubt, Robert found it hard to sleep. He kept replaying the scene in his mind. "I need to know what's in that box," he thought repeatedly. The mystery gnawed at him, making him restless. He decided to find the right moment to confront Sarah, but it had to be done tactfully. Until then, he'd watch and wait. The next morning, Robert saw the children playing in the garden. It seemed like a perfect opportunity. He walked over to Sarah and asked bluntly, "What's in the box, Sarah? And why is there a secret compartment in my garage?" Sarah's face turned pale. She stumbled on her words, trying to deny everything at first. Robert stood firm, determined to get some answers. Sarah initially denied everything, but eventually broke down. Tears streamed down her face. "All right, I'll tell you," she said, her voice shaking. She reached for the box and slowly opened it, revealing its contents. "These are items of sentimental value," she started, her tone filled with emotion. Robert watched intently, his own feelings a mix of curiosity and concern. With a trembling voice, Sarah explained the contents of the box. "These are some photographs and a letter," she said, gently lifting them out. Each item held a story from her past, filled with memories. Robert saw the genuine emotion in her eyes as she talked about each piece. "I hid them for safekeeping years ago," she added, looking down at the items. Tearfully, Sarah recounted how she'd hidden the box years ago. "I worked briefly as a housekeeper for the previous owner," she explained. "When my life started falling apart, this was my only safe place." Her voice broke as she spoke, and Robert felt a pang of empathy. The mystery unraveled, revealing a painful past. He nodded slowly, trying to process everything she had just shared. Robert was stunned by Sarah's story, but something about it didn't sit right with him. He looked at her, trying to piece it all together. Why didn't she mention this before? He wondered. Despite the compelling details, he couldn't shake the feeling that more was going on. For now, he nodded and listened, hiding his skepticism behind a calm facade. He decided to bide his time before making any decisions. Still feeling conflicted, Robert knew he had to verify Sarah's claims before deciding on his next move. He wasn't one to make rash decisions, especially when it came to opening his home. "I need to check her story out," he thought. He decided to track down the former homeowner she mentioned. His plan was simple: get confirmation, then decide on the next step. Until then, he'd keep up appearances. Robert picked up his phone and dialed the number he found for Mr. Thompson, the previous homeowner. After a few rings, a friendly voice answered. "Hello?" Robert tried to keep his tone casual. "Hi, this is Robert, the new owner of your old house. I wanted to ask you about a woman named Sarah. Did she work for you?" After a pause, Thompson confirmed, "Yes, she did. Why do you ask?" Mr. Thompson continued, "Sarah was one of the most trustworthy people I ever met. She had a rough life, but she always did her job well. Why? Has something happened?" Robert felt a weight lift off his shoulders, but he knew he couldn't fully relax just yet. "No, nothing like that. I just wanted to verify her story," he replied. Thompson's words eased some of his concerns, but questions remained. Feeling a mix of relief and confusion, Robert approached Sarah to discuss her housing. "Sarah, I talked to Mr. Thompson. He had good things to say about you. Let's get you proper housing through social services," he suggested. Sarah looked surprised, but hopeful. "Do you really think they can help?" she asked. "Yes, let's start the process tomorrow," Robert replied. He was determined to do the right thing for the children. Sarah and Robert agreed to meet with social services the next day. "It's important for the kids to be safe," Robert said, trying to emphasize the urgency. "I understand. Thank you, Robert. This means a lot," Sarah replied earnestly. They outlined their plans for the following day, aiming for a fresh start for Sarah and her children. Things seemed to be looking up, if only for a moment. The next morning, Robert felt an unexpected sense of calm wash over him. He got ready for the social services visit, feeling hopeful about the day. For the first time in a while, he believed things might actually work out. "Let's get this sorted," he thought, readying himself. This sense of calm was new, and it gave him the clarity he'd been missing amidst the chaos and uncertainty. Before the social services team arrived, Robert decided to check the garage one last time. Stepping inside, he was taken aback by its pristine condition. Everything was in order, almost too tidy. "This is unusual," he murmured, looking around. The usually cluttered space now looked unnaturally clean. It left him with an uneasy feeling, but he brushed it off, choosing to focus on the task ahead: securing a better future for Sarah and her kids. As social services pulled up, Robert decided to take one last look at the security footage, out of habit more than anything else. Skimming through the previous night's recording, he noticed something odd. Sarah was seen leaving the garage, holding a small, shiny object. "What is that?" he wondered, squinting at the screen in disbelief. The object's significance evaded him, but it surely added another layer of mystery. The scene replayed in his mind, heightening his confusion and concern. This unexpected discovery required immediate attention, yet social services were already waiting outside. "I need to handle this carefully," he thought, deciding to proceed with the day's plan while keeping this new revelation in mind. Rushing to the garage, Robert found his car keys missing. Panic surged through him as he frantically searched the space. "This can't be happening," he whispered, sifting through every corner of the room. His hands trembled as he overturned boxes and looked under the workbench. Realizing the keys were gone and something was terribly wrong, He couldn't help but feel a looming sense of dread. What had he missed? Almost simultaneously, Robert's phone rang, jolting him from his frantic search. It was social services. "Mr. Robert, it's about Sarah," the voice on the other end said. "She and the children have taken off in your car." Robert's eyes widened, his heart sinking further. "They what?" he gasped. The gravity of the situation hit him hard. The family, whom he had tried to help, had vanished with his vehicle. As the news sunk in, Robert stood frozen in the garage. Sarah and the kids had tricked him. They had disappeared without a trace, taking his car with them. His heart felt heavy with disappointment and betrayal. "How could I have been so naive?" he muttered, shaking his head. In that moment, he realized that his good intentions had led to an unexpected, painful conclusion. They had vanished completely. Regaining his composure, Robert quickly called the authorities to report his stolen car. "I need to report a theft," he said, his voice trembling. As he provided the necessary details, he couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and sadness. They seemed so genuine, he thought. The officer promised to start an investigation right away. Hanging up the phone, Robert felt an emptiness. He couldn't escape the feeling of having been deeply deceived. Robert sat down heavily on a nearby bench, reflecting on the turn of events. He remembered the innocent faces of the children, their laughter filling his home. Was it all an act? He wondered. He thought about Sarah's stories, their conversations, and the trust he had placed in them. As minutes turned into hours, Robert couldn't stop replaying everything in his mind, trying to pinpoint where things had gone wrong. Word spread quickly among the neighbors. Mrs. Henderson walked over, concern etched on her face. "Robert, I heard what happened. Are you all right?" she asked softly. "I am, just shocked," he replied. Another neighbor chimed in. "We warned you." Robert nodded, swallowing the bitter truth. Their mixed reactions ranged from pity to smug, "I told you so" looks. Despite their words, Robert couldn't shake the feeling of responsibility for what had happened. With the neighbors' voices echoing in his mind, Robert wondered what the future held. He knew finding Sarah and the kids wouldn't be easy. Where could they be? He questioned. Despite his frustration, part of him still hoped they were safe. He remembered the tentative plans for social services, now crumbled. As he walked back into his house, the future seemed uncertain, filled with unanswered questions and lingering doubts. Later that day, Detective Johnson arrived to gather more information. "We're doing everything we can, Mr. Robert," he assured. "Do you have any idea where they might have gone?" Robert shook his head. "No clue. They seemed desperate, but I didn't expect this." The detective took notes, asking for any possible leads. Robert provided what little he knew, hoping it would help. The waiting game began, fueling Robert's anxiety. Alone in his house, Robert couldn't stop second-guessing his decisions. Should I have been more cautious? He pondered. Each step he had taken replayed in his head, from the initial invitation to the moment he discovered the theft. Guilt gnawed at him, but he also felt a strange sense of resolve. If they come back, he thought, I'll be ready. Despite everything, he couldn't stop hoping for a better outcome. Days turned into weeks with no news. Robert started focusing on new beginnings. The garage, once a haven for Sarah and her kids, now stood empty and silent. He invested his time in community service, hoping to find some semblance of peace. What's done is done, he reminded himself. Though the incident left a significant impact, Robert decided to continue helping others, albeit with more caution and wisdom from his experience. Then, just as Robert was settling into his new routine, there was a knock at his door. Opening it, he found Sarah standing there, holding her children's hands. "Mr. Robert, can we talk?" she asked, eyes filled with tears. He hesitated, heart pounding, before nodding and stepping aside to let them in. The surprise visit caught him off guard, leaving him unsure of what to expect next. Once inside, Sarah broke down in tears. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "We didn't mean to scare you or take advantage. Things got complicated, and I panicked." Robert listened, a mix of anger and empathy swirling in his chest. The children clung to Sarah, their eyes wide and confused. "Why did you take my car?" he finally asked, his voice steady despite his turbulent emotions. Sarah's explanation was simple, yet heartbreaking. "I was desperate," she admitted. "I got a call about a job opportunity, but it was out of town. I knew we needed to leave immediately. I didn't think straight, and grabbed your keys." Her words poured out in a frantic rush. Robert listened intently, torn between pity and frustration. Could he trust her again after everything that had happened? Robert stood there, processing her words. His emotions were all over the place. "Why didn't you just ask for help?" he asked, his voice softer this time. Sarah wiped her tears and looked at him with remorse. "I was scared you'd say no. I didn't think you'd understand our desperation," she replied. Her honesty struck a chord with him, making it even harder to decide his next move. Sarah continued, "We've been living day to day for so long. I didn't think anyone would really help us. I acted out of fear." Her eyes met his, pleading silently for forgiveness. Robert took a deep breath, processing everything. He looked at the innocent faces of the children, realizing that despite the betrayal, they needed stability. "Let's figure this out together," he said finally, offering a small but genuine smile. Robert decided to help Sarah and the children find a more stable living situation. "First, let's get your car sorted out," he suggested. "We'll figure out the living arrangements after." Sarah nodded, her gratitude evident. They made a plan to visit social services again, this time with a clear goal in mind. Despite the deceit, Robert felt a renewed sense of purpose. He hoped this time would be different. The next morning, Robert accompanied Sarah and the kids to social services. "We'll make sure you're taken care of properly," he reassured her as they waited. This visit felt more promising, with the social worker taking a genuine interest in their case. They discussed housing options and job assistance. For the first time in weeks, it seemed like there was a real chance for a fresh start. After a lengthy meeting, they left social services with a plan in place. Sarah would receive temporary housing and job training. "Thank you, Mr. Robert," she said, her eyes filled with sincere gratitude. "We couldn't have done this without you." Robert felt a sense of relief, mixed with cautious optimism. They had made progress, but he knew that trust would still take time to rebuild fully. Back home, the neighbors noticed the return of Sarah and her kids. Mrs. Henderson approached Robert once more. "Looks like they're back. Everything all right?" she asked, clearly curious. "Yes, we're sorting things out," Robert replied. His brief response left little room for further probing. He wanted to protect Sarah from any judgment and focus on their positive steps forward without unnecessary gossip complicating their lives. Over the following days, Robert and Sarah worked to rebuild trust. She started attending her job training sessions, and the kids began settling into their new routine. Robert kept a close eye, ensuring everything stayed on track. With each passing day, the tension eased. Their situation wasn't perfect, but it was improving. Slowly but surely, they were piecing together a new life, one step at a time.